Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Income is the Outcome, where we believe it's not how much you have, it's how much you keep. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and I'm joined by Tim Whistler. He is the founder and president of the Whistler Agency. We're so glad you're joining us today. The title of today's show is When Should You File for Your Social Security Benefit? If you've ever asked yourself that question, you're gonna want to stick around for this important conversation. So much goes into this. Tim, we've got a lot to cover today, but it's great to be here with you. How are you?
I'm well, Kristen. It's good to be here with you as well.
Well, thank you. Well, this subject of Social Security, you and I both know, can be very complex, very confusing. There's so many rules out there, and there's a lot of talk these days about trying to maximize your Social Security benefit. But is that really the goal? We're going to be talking today about how important it is to optimize your benefits, and there's so many personal factors that can often far outweigh the math to help you arrive at the right decision for you of when is the best time for you to claim your Social Security benefit. So before we get into this conversation, Tim, I think it's important for us to go over some of the basics just to help folks understand what filing at different ages might mean for them. So let's start with that.
Absolutely. So, back in the day, Social Security used to mail your statements to you, right? Now they're accessible online. So if you haven't taken the time to go online and create your own account, be sure to do that. Their website is simply ssa.gov, ssa.gov. There you'll be able to create your account, you can access your statement. And then when you pull that statement out, just like you said, there will be about 9 different numbers there in front of you beginning at the age of 62 all the way through 70. So if we want to start with the basics, let's kind of walk through that.
All right.
So you can begin your Social Security benefits as early as 62, right? Then the next line down is going to talk about what they call your full retirement age. So full retirement age is really dependent upon your year of birth. So for example, I'm going to reference notes here today because this is really technical, so we want to make sure that we're accurate. So anyone be born between 55 and 59, your full retirement age benefit somewhere going to be around the age of 66 and 2 months, 4 months, somewhere around there, okay? But if you were born in 1960 or later, your full retirement age is 67. So again, when you look at that statement, you're gonna see on there that based upon your year of birth, your full retirement age benefit will be 66 and months or 67. That's the number that you have basically earned, if you will, for all those years that you had deductions taken out of your paycheck, okay? But then as you comb further down that statement, you'll see numbers for 68, 69, and 70. So Kristen, I love your intro because maximizing a Social Security benefit is simple. You just take the highest payout and press go.
Which would mean waiting until age 70, and that's the maximum amount you can receive, right?
That's right, because also too, when you look at that statement, they will see that every year that they defer it after their full retirement age benefit, that payout increases by 8% every year. Now that'll grab some people's attention, right? So therefore, we're not really necessarily talking per se about maximizing your benefit, but again, optimizing what's the right time to turn the income on based upon what you're looking for in retirement.
Right, and real quick, I just want to say too, for those who turn it on as early as age 62, even though you can, that might not be the best case scenario because what happens prior to your full retirement age if you claim it before then?
That's exactly right. If you look at the difference on that statement between your full retirement age benefit and 62 and get your calculator out, it's about a 30% loss or I should say a reduction of benefit.
Right.
So therefore you're turning on early, which sometimes, we'll talk through that here in a second, but sometimes we need to turn on early or maybe we want to turn it on early, which is fine, but we just want to make sure that is that the optimal time in which to turn on that important benefit?
For sure. We're going to keep coming back to that word throughout today's show. To your point, clearly, if you want to maximize your Social Security benefit, as Tim said, waiting until age 70 ensures that you're going to get the maximum amount that you're eligible for. However, even though a lot of folks think maybe that's what they should do, we have some interesting stats here. This is according to the Congressional Research Service. They say that less than 10% of retirees actually wait until age 70 to claim their benefits, and 30% of retirees go ahead and claim their benefit as early as age 62. Now, we've kind of talked about the difference between those ages that results in a huge difference in the amount, but why do you think that that's what stats are showing?
It's very interesting, those numbers, because it's like I've never calculated a survey or done a survey of all my clients and when they turn on Social Security, but I think we're pretty close to those numbers.
Interesting, okay.
And I think where a lot of folks want to turn on 62, turn on benefits at 62, for example, Sometimes it's an emotional decision. You know, from the standpoint of, look, I worked hard, I saved, I sacrificed for decades, I had that deduction come out of my paycheck, I want to get to that as soon as possible.
Right.
Fine, we can turn on at 62. You know, another scenario that comes up, unfortunately sometimes, is maybe the loss of a job. You know, we had the idea, we want to retire on our timeline, but maybe that company had different plans, and all of a sudden maybe we lost our job a little bit earlier than we had planned. So maybe we want to have, you know, that Social Security benefit turn on early to maybe help offset the loss of income.
Right.
You know, another scenario that we've experienced in our years of helping folks is, you know, health conditions. You know, unfortunately, sometimes health takes a different turn for us.
Right.
So maybe with some rising healthcare costs, or again, we won't talk about it in too much detail today, but you know, should you decide to retire before 65, which is your Medicare age, we need to plan for those expenses. And if we don't have a group benefit that'll carry us from that last day of full-time work to Medicare age, we have to come up with some type of health insurance plan, and some of those can be a little bit costly. So sometimes, you know, that might be another reason to turn on as early as 62.
For sure. And I definitely heard too that I think, you know, this wouldn't be true for your clients because you do such a great job of educating people and helping them think through these different scenarios. But for the general public, there's a lack of education about what turning on at different ages could mean. A lot of times folks just want to turn it on at 62 because they've heard that that's the age and they're eligible and they think, great, let me do it, but they don't realize the implications that there could be a 30% reduction in their benefit by doing so. So that's why it's such an important conversation to understand the different scenarios of what, you know, when turning it on, what that might mean for you. This is also interesting. You mentioned folks wanting to retire on their terms, right? And sometimes folks are wanting to wait to turn on Social Security till later on in their lives. But according to research by JP Morgan Asset Management, nearly 70% of workers expect to retire at age 65 or older, but only 34% of retirees managed to work that long. Some of the reasons for that, nearly 1/3 cited health problems or disabilities, 23%, as you mentioned, cited corporate downsizing, 13% said they retired early to either care for a spouse or another ailing family member. So sometimes the best laid plans don't work out the way that folks think they might.
That's exactly right. It's just one of those things where it's constantly in motion. It's fluid. There's unfortunately a lot of things out of our control that can really dictate, you know, if this is the plan that we have, but maybe some similar situation occurs like what you just mentioned, it can alter that original plan. So therefore we have to kind of go back and maybe restructure the original plan, look at the numbers. And I think that's what's so important about not taking on this decision by yourself, right? Having another set of eyes that maybe not, quote unquote, be as emotionally attached to those numbers can maybe help shed some light on, okay, when is the optimal time?
Right.
If maybe we feel like emotionally we want to turn that on early because of this or this or this, okay, well, maybe another set of eyes would say, okay, we understand that, and we're not saying that's the wrong way of looking at it.
Right.
But let's include that decision with the overall retirement income plan. It's a very, very important piece to that puzzle, but we also want to make sure that we leverage and optimize that benefit, because once we turn that sieve on, that income's coming in, that's basically it.
Right.
So we want to make sure that's the right time to turn those benefits on.
For sure. One last question I have for you in this segment. In my work as a financial educator, as I've traveled and talked about Social Security, I know a common question that folks have, or something they have heard about, is known as the break-even point. Can you explain what this break-even point is with Social Security and how that ties into this timing conversation we're having?
So that break-even point is that magical formula of trying to figure out which of these scenarios wins. So what I mean by that is, years ago, we used to provide educational workshops specifically for Social Security.
Yeah.
And I would use the analogy of triplets.
Okay.
Stan, Earl, and Dell.
Okay.
Okay? They're all born the same day, they're triplets.
Okay.
Stan took his benefit at his standard full retirement age benefit.
Okay.
Earl took it early.
Okay.
And Dell, of course, delayed it. So who wins? Well, we can't answer that question until we know kind of how long are we going to need to have the benefit. So in other words, and to your point, when we talk about, you know, some studies that are out there, when JP Morgan Asset Management did some surveys on that, they basically said, okay, here's kind of how we provide that break-even point. The break-even point is again, trying to decide which of those values provides the greater cumulative benefit. In other words, do we turn it on early with a reduced benefit and have that benefit particularly maybe possibly for a longer period of time?
Right.
Or do we turning the income on. It's a higher payout, but it may take a few more years to catch up with that overall. So what wins? And so again, that survey that they did said if you don't expect to live past age 77, go ahead and claim your benefits as early as 62. Get the thing going. Again, we don't know that last day. We can kind of speculate.
I was going to say, if we all knew our last day, this conversation would make this decision would be a lot easier, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So we can only again just go by what we think about that may happen.
Sure. Yep.
If you expect to live beyond age 77, maybe postpone your benefits until your full retirement age benefit. Okay. And if you expect to live beyond age 81, it sounds like a long way away, but it's amazing how fast time goes, and we get into retirement together. There's probably a good chance husband and wife, one of them is going to get into their 80s and possibly in their 90s.
Right.
If that's the case, we may want to consider deferring the benefit until age 70. So that's kind of what we talk about the break-even point. That's the magical formula that we really don't have a defined number because we don't know how long we're going to need the benefit. So we just take the information, apply it to the current formula, and move forward.
Right. Well, as I said at the top of the show, too, there's so many personal factors that far outweigh the math. Again, we don't know the day that we are going to take our last breath. If we did, then this decision would be a whole lot easier, but we have to factor in all these different things into the equation. And as we continue on throughout today's show, we're going to discuss a lot of those personal factors that really can add complexity to making sure folks are making the right decision and optimizing your Social Security benefit for you. But Tim, if someone's watching right now and they're going, okay, this is a lot to take in, I need some help figuring out when the right time is for me, what would you say to them?
I would say don't feel alone. Every one of our clients that we have engaged with are exactly where you are right now. And what the only difference is the fact that they took action. They picked up the phone, they scanned the QR code, they got on our calendar, and we started that conversation. Because whenever we engage with folks in that very, very first conversation, a part of that first fact-finding conversation that we're going to have is what are the numbers for you for Social Security? So if you've not turned on the benefit yet, you're kind of trying to figure out, and pondering the decision, what is the optimal time? Bring those statements in with you. We'll talk through it. We'll include that in the overall income analysis for you so you can have that written financial plan that includes when to optimize your Social Security benefits.
Wonderful. Tim, thank you so much. I know we have a lot more to get into today, and thank you again for being here with us. But if this is resonating with you, if you would like help navigating this important decision for you and your spouse, your family, we encourage you to reach out, and you can do so by calling 888-992-7829 to claim your very own complimentary written financial plan. And as Tim mentioned, as part of that, you're going to receive your own Social Security optimization analysis as well. Or if you'd rather connect online, you can simply pull out your smartphone, open up that camera app. You can scan that QR code that you see there down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That will take you over to a landing page, ask you a few short, simple questions, and then a member of the team from the Whistler Agency will reach out to connect with you to schedule your complimentary meeting that way as well. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some specific strategies when it comes to this Social Security decision based on whether you are married or divorced, or maybe you're single or a widow or a widower. You're going to want to stay with us to find out what these different strategies might mean for you. Stay with us.
What kind of led me into this business was the year 2000. Within a span of 4 months, we went from a moment of just pure jubilation to just a horrible situation, from the birth of our firstborn to the death of my mother 4 months after that, and she was 52. And I was only 31 at the time. And here, Cameron's not even 4 months old. My mom's now passed away. You really start to reflect on what life is all about. Deep down, I always kind of wanted to run my own business at some form or fashion, but I didn't know what that entailed. But it became very apparent when I saw what my father went through financially after the death of my mother. One of the most smartest guys I've ever known. But just like with most people, finances was a foreign language to him. And he somewhat got taken advantage of by an advisor. So that was the moment where I knew this is what I wanted to do, because I didn't want to just make a living, I wanted to make a difference. My mom has never seen my logo. She's never heard me on a podcast. She's never seen me do a presentation, but she's the fuel that fills my passion for this industry because of the fact that I miss her terribly even today, almost 23 years. It was what I saw my dad go through that inspires me to say, okay, if that happens to somebody else, as long as I can have that conversation ahead of time, hopefully then they won't experience what my dad went through. And that's what ultimately led me into the business. And I feel as though this is where God led me, and I love being here. And as long as He continues to bless me of sound mind and body, this is what I'll do for the rest of my days.
Well, welcome back to Income is the Outcome. I'm Kristen Oakley here with Tim Whistler, and today we are handling the question of when should you file for your Social Security benefit. We've talked about the importance of optimizing it for you, because as we say at the beginning of every show, it's not about how much you earn, it's how much you keep that matters. And we talked about a lot of the pros and cons from a mathematical standpoint based on what ages someone might choose to file. Let's now focus on how people can optimize their benefits based on their family status, if you will, right? So there's a lot of strategies for married couples. Why don't we start with that?
Absolutely. You know, it's whenever we're sitting down with couples, husband and wife going into retirement together, and they both have earned a Social Security benefit. We want to absolutely include that into the overall plan, because of the fact of, number one, what I look at is, number one, you know, we want to make sure that we're optimizing the benefit for income. But then I'm looking at it a whole different lenses, not trying to be morbid, but from the standpoint of husband and wife are in retirement together. One passes away before the other. The lower of the two benefits ceases to exist.
Right, they lose one of the two checks, right?
They lose it. So for example, let's say one benefits $3,000 a month, the other benefits $2,000 a month, okay? So between the two of them, they're bringing in $5,000 a month of Social Security benefits just alone, not counting anything else.
Right.
One of the spouses passes away. There goes $24,000 of annual income. It's gone.
Right, because the $2,000 check will go away. They get to keep the higher of the two, which is a blessing, but you still have to account for that.
That's exactly right. So that way then, whenever we decide when is that optimal time to turn that on, we're going to talk through that. Because of the fact of, you know, it may behoove us to, you know, we may sit down and they're like of the opinion, you know what, I want to turn this on at 62. And maybe both of them say that. Okay, that's fine. Let's run those numbers. But let's also run these other numbers as well, just to see, because of the fact of, again, chances are one of those other benefits are going to be important to you when you possibly survive your spouse, or vice versa, when they survive you, because that higher benefit will remain. So maybe we want to talk through optimizing that higher benefit, because that's actually going to play a very, very important role to the surviving spouse when it comes to them going through retirement on their own.
Right, yep. And again, that becomes a very important strategy to look at, knowing, and I would say especially for my female friends watching this show, we on average are living 5 to 6 years longer than men. We especially need to pay attention to this, because not only then do we lose one of the two Social Security checks, so you want to have the highest check possible that you still get to keep, but we go into higher the tax brackets get cut in half, which means we're going to have to pay more tax on, you know, similar amounts of income. So there's a lot of challenges with that.
There are. In fact, you know, when you go online and try to start to absorb this information, there's a lot of great resources out there. But again, try not to, you know, try to avoid taking a drink of water with a fire hose, because it will happen. You can consume a lot of information, but there's a fantastic resource out there. And Kristen, I'm glad you brought that up. Social Security has a PDF out there that's entitled "What Every Woman Should Know," and I think that's just a good piece to start through, just from the standpoint of starting that conversation. It's awkward, it's uncomfortable. We don't want to think about the demise of a spouse.
Right.
Okay, I get it. But from the standpoint of, again, it's a conversation, I think it's important. And again, the numbers will simply show that a lot of times the ladies are kind of the ones that are left behind. So we want to plan for them.
Yep.
You know, that's why we write the articles in Experience Health every other month. It's just trying to help, you know, ladies kind of successfully navigate this journey that before they kind of were just along for the ride. Their husband was taking care of things. They had two sources of Social Security benefits. They've got, you know, IRA dollars coming in. They've got everything else. All of a sudden now their world changes dramatically. They've lost their spouse. Now income is being taken away. So if we can kind of know that maybe ahead of time, maybe it kind of helps us, again, have that conversation to optimize not just the income we need for retirement, but also, too, for the survivorship benefits.
Right, so true. Well, let's also talk to those who might be watching who are already a widow or a widower. I know there's some strategies when it comes to survivor benefits, you know, for people who might be in that situation, and it might depend on what age they are, right, Tim?
Exactly. So, for example, you know, and again, I'm going to refer back to my notes because I want to be technical with this information. So if you're a widow or a widower, you can file for survivor benefits as early as 60. But again, keep in mind that that benefit can be reduced, but just know that it's there for you, you know, if we need it.
Yep.
Right? If we need that income to come in, then let's go ahead and turn that valve on and create that income. Now, if you own your own benefit, and this is where it gets interesting, if you own your own benefit that will be less than the survivor benefit, a better strategy might be to file your own benefit at 62 and then maybe defer the surviving
benefit.
Right? And then where that also can work in reverse, right? For example, you know, unlike your own benefit, you know, one thing we got to be mindful of is the survivor benefit will not continue to increase in value past your full retirement age.
That's important to know for sure.
Exactly. So we want to say that again. When you defer your own benefit past full retirement age, every year up until 70, your benefit will increase by 8%. But if you have access to a survivor benefit and you want to maybe defer that past your full retirement age, don't do that because it will not increase in value. That 8% does not apply to a survivor benefit, only to your own primary benefit.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So that's another important strategy that we talk about. And one other thing, and again, a client story comes to mind where husband and wife came in and met with me several years ago. He had some money sitting in an old 401k. They kind of felt like it was kind of sitting there dormant, wasn't really doing anything for them. So we had a couple different conversations, kind of created a plan, kind of created that foundation for that overall income plan for them. They were both still working, but we decided that we can maybe reallocate that 401k, put it into a different bucket, get it to provide some benefit for them. And so then we set the plan in motion and we move forward. A few months later, I get a phone call and they needed to meet with me immediately. And you just never know, that's probably never going to be good news. It's going to be portrayed. And they came in, as soon as they walked through the door, I could see it on their faces. And we sat down, went to the conference room and sat down, and he shares with me that he was just diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
Wow.
And it just tears your heart out because now everything we just planned for was completely altered. And we went through that process, and unfortunately, the cancer took his life, a few months after that. And so now we're sitting down with his wife. And basically what we did was we were able to optimize the Social Security survivor benefit, the widow benefit. And what we did for her, because it worked out for her, was she was still working. She wanted to continue to work for a period of time just to kind of distract her mind a little bit about going through life now without her husband. So she continued to work, and she was able to draw his benefit as a survivor benefit. By doing so, she deferred her own full retirement age benefit.
Right.
It kept increasing.
Yes.
So when we showed her the numbers of saying, okay, you're still working, once you decide to stop working and you're receiving your Social Security from your husband's benefit, then at 70, we can flip the switch and give you a raise.
Right, and it'll be even more because she's allowed her benefit to grow in the background.
That's exactly right. So it's unique for everybody. It's not a cookie cutter approach. Just because it worked for your cousin's brother-in-law doesn't mean it's going to work for you. You want to sit down, have the conversation, let's look at the numbers and see how they possibly fit inside this big puzzle known as retirement income planning.
Right, Tim, such an important puzzle, and thank you for sharing that story. And we know that you watching, you all have different life experiences. This is why there's no substitute for sitting down in the financial planning environment, taking all these things into consideration and seeing what the optimal strategy would be for you. Another thing I think it's important to point out is that the Social Security Administration is allowed to give you information, but they are not allowed to give you individual personalized advice based on your situation. The only way you can receive that type of personal advice is by coming in and sitting down with someone like Tim and the team of the Whistler Agency to figure out what the optimal strategy would be for you. So again, we invite you to pick up the phone, call the number you see on the bottom of your screen to schedule your complimentary written financial plan, and as part of that, you will receive your very own Social Security Optimization Report. That number to call is 888-992-7829, or again, you're welcome to scan that QR code and that will get you connected as well. When we come back, we're going to be covering some strategies for those of you who may have gone through a divorce, or if you've never been married and are single, stay with us.
As individuals, we strive for better, from a better house, to a better career, to a better life for our kids. But when it comes time to your retirement, what does better mean to you? More income, a flexible lifestyle, better solutions. A better retirement begins with a plan. To get your complimentary written financial plan, call the number you see here. You only retire once. This is your opportunity to plan for better. The way I view this, numbers are amoral. It's the people behind the numbers that I like to learn about. What does retirement look like for them? What are they going to do with these numbers? How long do they think these numbers need to last them? What type of legacy plan do they want to leave for their kids and their grandkids? That's kind of that first dynamic of the conversation, is more just along the lines of, getting acquainted and just kind of discovering what it is that we're working with. If they've ever sat through a timeshare presentation, this is completely the opposite. There is no sales pressure whatsoever, no obligation, there's no risk involved. It's just a simple 1-hour conversation. I think a successful retirement is all about having a plan, because if you think about the unfortunate situations where professional athletes go bankrupt just a few years after they end their professional career, these people have earned tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars, and then they're bankrupt. I just firmly believe that happened because there was no plan. not only just for the immediate, but also kind of for the foreseeable future. And we can always reflect back on that plan and make sure we're on the right track.
Welcome back to Income is the Outcome, where today Tim and I have been discussing the important question of when should you file for your Social Security benefit. As we've shared on today's show, there's so many personal factors that go into this important, critical decision to help you optimize your benefit. Before the break, Tim, you shared a very powerful story of a woman who you were able to help optimize her benefits as her husband had passed away. Let's talk now about folks who are divorced, because there's some other strategies that might come into play if that's part of their situation.
That's exactly right. So again, I'm going to refer back to my notes just because there's some technical details, but it says if you're divorced, you're also eligible for survivor benefits as early as age 60.
Right, if you're divorced, deceased, if your ex-spouse passed away is what we're trying to say, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And it says if the marriage lasted at least 10 years and you didn't remarry before age 60.
Right.
So something to kind of think about here. So it says if you remarry before age 60, it won't affect survivor benefits, but you might want to wait. So like, for example, if you're 59 and a half and madly in love,
right,
you might want to wait until 60 for the fact of how the surviving benefits comes into play, because basically what can happen is you have the ability to draw a benefit from your ex-spouse. Okay? Now, unlike a pension, this doesn't impact their benefit. It's completely separate.
Right.
They're not really even aware. It's not like you're doing anything that's not really right or wrong. It's just a matter of you have eligibility to draw down a benefit from an ex-spouse.
Right. Yeah, and that's an important note, because I think some people are scared to pursue their divorce, their ex-spouse's benefits, because they're afraid they're going to be notified. They won't have any idea.
No, that's exactly right. Yep. So that's just kind of a general guideline as far as being divorced, going through that, just figuring out what are you eligible to receive and optimizing again that benefit.
And what about someone who's single, who's never had marriage or divorce part of the equation?
Again, I think that's a great question, because of the fact of, again, if you're on this journey by yourself, but you've not had those previous life experiences like that, we're going to sit down and make sure we optimize that benefit for you. Does it make sense to go ahead and turn it on early and maybe draw down some of the assets to create income? Should we wait until full retirement age benefit? And maybe what if we decide to defer it till age 70, get that 8% bump? Because one thing we didn't touch on today, I want to close with this. If you decide to turn on a benefit prior to your full retirement age benefit, do not go out and earn too much money.
Right. Yeah, if you're still working, that can complicate it.
It can complicate it. So again, it goes back to picking up the phone, having a conversation. We'll include it in the overall retirement income plan analysis and make sure that we optimize your Social Security benefit.
Yep, and by complicated, you won't get as much as you could have received otherwise, right?
That's right.
So much to know. The bottom line is we're here to help you. So pick up the phone and call Tim today to schedule your time to come in and receive your very own Social Security optimization report. We'll see you next time.